Hey everybody, and welcome to this very special presentation on COVID-19 risk assessment tools. So whilst we are here, maybe we'll use this as an opportunity to remind ourselves of why we are here, why we're on this live broadcast right now. So if you're watching on the live presentation, be sure to comment in the comments box below to let me know what's brought you here today. What is that key thing that you need to know, or that piece of advice that will really make a difference for you? Be sure to share that in the comments box, and over the next 15 to 20 minutes, I'm going to do my very best to cover a lot of material, a lot of information, and I want to make sure that I am hitting the mark. The best way for me to do that is for those watching live to stick in what's brought you here today. What is that key thing? And for those who are watching the recording, also, please feel free to introduce yourselves and to let us know what's brought you here today. Okay, so my promise to you today, lots of content, a speedy pace. So I'm only going to be broadcasting for 15 to 20 minutes. I want to try and keep this one short and condensed. And at the very end of this presentation, I'll point you in the direction of where you can get additional support moving forward into 2022. So does that sound good, folks? Let me know in the comments and I'll kick it off. Awesome. All right. So background story. So this time last week, I found myself in sunny Nelson. I had been asked to spend 3 days helping a very large organization work through the various tasks, the various work groups within their business to assess whether vaccination mandates were required for specific teams or specific tasks within the business. Huge undertaking, and there was a lot of lessons learned, and it was a very successful 3 days, and it's now still being lived and breathed as we speak. Still conversations going on among the organization, but one thing that's really stood the test is that the material and the approach that I used has led to a really successful outcome for this really large, very multidisciplinary organization. And this is what I'm going to share with you guys in this presentation. Okay, so first and foremost, let's focus in on empathy. So for those of you who have got your workbooks, this is the empathy section. Basically, I wanted to spend 2 or 3 minutes on empathy just to enable you guys to understand the importance of bringing empathy to the conversations and the discussions that we will inevitably be having within our places of work. If you haven't already done so, it will certainly be on the cards in the near future. One of our big roles within health and safety is to be a facilitator of conversation. And the best way to approach facilitating is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. So if you're in a work group, being able to encourage people to speak up, to feel confident and comfortable to speak up, to feel that they are in a safe environment, really, empathy gives you the superpower to achieve that. So it's enabling you as the facilitator to have your ears to the ground. If you've already established good working relationships with the people that you happen to work with or who you work with in your consultancies, having those established relationships can make a really huge difference. It's a way in which you can capture the key conversations and the key points that are being raised around the table and funneling those into the golden nugget moments when someone says something, it's like, oh, that's interesting, let's explore that more. By doing that, it then enables us to really delve into our curiosity space. These are not the hard skills that we often hear about, knowing about legislation, knowing about the clauses and the statements from the latest regs or best practice guidelines. This is the soft skills. This is the stuff that we don't tend to get taught much about, but it's absolutely critical to amazing, effective results. By exploring and getting curious about what we're hearing around the table, it enables us to then start to determine how people are likely to behave based on the information that we are getting around the table. By having our ears to the ground, by listening to what's being said, by exploring some of those key golden nugget moments, those key pieces of information that are shared across the table, and allowing the group to explore those to the nth degree, enables us to then to really start to understand what is going to be acceptable and what's going to be a really a significant challenge or pain point within that group and within that business. It's a real superpower. Empathy is one of those top skills which I believe I'm pretty strong in. I'm still trying to build on, but empathy can make you either the superhero in the room, or if you play your cards wrong, it can actually really be detrimental to the successful outcome of the presentation and those conversations. So we're trying to avoid making those mistakes. And the way in which we do that is by being an effective listener. So by demonstrating empathy, by having good relationships with the people around the table, by creating a safe environment to allow them to speak freely, we are then able to absorb and take on board the key information which will allow the business to make the right decisions when it comes to the vaccination in the workplace. Now, some of the key things which makes a great active listener includes open-ended questions. So if you are facilitating that conversation, you've got your risk assessment spreadsheet template in front of you and in front of the group. You need to ask those open-ended questions to enable the participants to actually start to explore what are the risks and what are the controls in order to reduce the risks associated with working in a vaccinated or non-vaccinated work environment. Ask for clarification. So if you're not sure about a particular point that's been raised, or just as importantly, if you've heard a point that you really like, ask for clarification on it. And by doing that, it's making sure that you actually understand what they're trying to say. And by one way to really hammer that home is by paraphrasing back what you've just heard. By doing so, you're winning buy-in. You're also getting real clarity on the points that have been raised. And you're giving everyone in the room a sense that what they are saying is critically important. And it is. And by doing so, you're going to get a much richer and more successful outcome when it comes to deciding whether vaccine and vaccination should be mandated within the work environment or not. Be attentive. I don't know about you, but there's nothing worse than being in a room and getting the sense that the person that you are speaking to is not listening. And I'll give you a real life example. I worked at a previous consultancy as a business partner, and my business partner was sat next to me as we were talking to a potential new client, a really big one. Now my business partner at the time made the decision to leave his phone off of silent and to leave it on the desk. So as the potential client was talking to us, his phone began to ring. He allowed the phone to continue to ring out. He didn't apologize. He didn't actually even respond to the fact that had happened. He then allowed that to happen a second time and then a third time during the same conversation. Unsurprisingly, we didn't get that customer because my business partner, who soon was not my business partner, failed to acknowledge and failed to be attentive and present in that meeting, making the other people in that room feel unimportant and basically valueless. So that's a top example of what not to do. Okay, so effective listening is all about open-ended questions, asking for clarification, paraphrasing what you've just heard back to the audience, being attentive, listening, eye contact, distractions away, being present, just making the room feel like they are extremely important to the conversation, because they really are. Okay, now the framework. Now I'm just going to quickly share my other screen and then we'll get the framework up for you guys. Okay, so now that I've opened up the COVID-19 risk assessment tool, you'll notice several things which I'm now going to just speak to. I'll just make it a little bit bigger for us to have a look at. Cool. Hopefully you can all read this. I'll just make it one time bigger. Okay, cool. So the risk assessment tool, the first thing off the bat is work task. All right. So we need to be sure that we are focusing in on a specific work task, a specific team, or a specific operation within the organization. It is extremely important to not make this about an individual or to find ourselves in a situation where we could be accused of focusing in on an individual. That is an employment issue, and we don't want to go down that road. Instead, we want to focus in on the tasks. The next thing to notice is that it has instructions for completing the assessment. So these are the instructions that are recommended by WorkSafe NZ. But I've also made an additional note, which is the 6th point. Attempt to exhaust all control methods available to you before selecting vaccination as mandatory for the work task. Now, the reason why I've inserted that is I really strongly encourage everyone, when they're going through this process, when you are facilitating these conversations, when you are utilizing your superpowers of empathy and of being a effective listener, is to ask the questions, the 6 questions that have been provided by WorkSafe NZ, and also the additional considerations that were first tabled by Michael Wood back in the 23rd of November, which have now been rinsed and repeated by the business.govt.nz risk framework, which we've all been waiting for, which has now been released, and basically it's the same as what it was 4 weeks ago, is by asking these questions, by taking these into consideration, coming up with controls of how we're going to reduce the risks that COVID presents to that work group, that are not immediately vexing, but to consider the controls that we could put in place to reduce the associated risk to that work group before we go down the vaccine route. So basically what I'm suggesting is, can we isolate that work group? Can we maintain team bubbles? Can we ensure that masks, that desks are spaced out wide and far, where before we may have teamed up and gone in a company vehicle together, can we now just enforce it that it's just one person, one vehicle policy? Trying to explore what's going to work well for the organization, not just in the short term, but in the long term. So what is actually going to work really practically. We identify those types of controls, and we consider the residual risk once those controls are put in place. Then, and only then, should we be then asking ourselves, okay, is that residual risk level satisfactory? And if it is, then we potentially don't have to mandate vaccination for that work group. If we look at the residual risk level once we've put those controls in place and it's still at an unacceptable risk level, and we've exhausted all other control methods, that's when we need to then think, okay, maybe this work group needs to be vaccinated. Obviously, by all means, if you are still a little bit unsure, or people are not quite convinced that that's the way to go, that's when you might want to start reaching out to professional advice, Hazard's Register, basically getting on there and finding your local consultant to help you work through that. This is the approach that I used with the large organization in Nelson. So those are the questions that we should be asking. Now, in terms of the controls, here's a really nice table that I'm going to just make a little bit bigger for you all. Okay, so I'll make this bigger so you can see in a second. But what we have here are the controls if we find ourselves in level red, or in the level orange, or in level green. So this is a living, breathing document. What that means is that hopefully it doesn't happen, but if we find ourselves going from one level to the next, we can keep coming back to this document and referring to the types of controls that are required for each of the levels. So it isn't just a document that sits on the shelf or sits on someone's desktop. It is something that is routinely reviewed and looked back at. So if we hone in on some of these, just in a little bit more detail, the controls that are listed in the red talk about the different circumstances we might find ourselves in. So working from home, site visits, client meetings, working in the office, administration, project work, mandated clients. For example, if we have teams that have to go to a mandated place of work, what does that mean? And we work our way through these different types of scenarios and the different types of controls that are required based on what level we find ourselves in. This is all editable, right? So by all means, look at this and use this as your framework, compare it to your existing risk and hazard register, and extract some of the controls that you've got in your place of work and place them onto this risk register. I am kind of recommending that we keep your company hazard and risk register separate to your COVID vaccination assessment register. And the reason is because we're exploring all the various tasks and all the various components of the business, it just keeps it a little bit cleaner to keep it separate. Now, what you could do is add in additional tabs. If I just take away my camera for a second, by the magic of tech, you can insert additional tabs here. So you could, for example, copy and paste, and you could make dozens of copies of this one, and for all the various tasks, for all the various work groups within your organization, and invite those work groups or cross sections of the work groups to sit around a table and to explore the risk levels, the types of controls that can be put in place, the residual risk levels. Are they acceptable? Do we need to think about vaccinating? What is the appetite for that within the group? By giving them the ability to talk freely in a open and safe environment, by giving them the sense that their opinions matter, because they do, by enabling them to feel that they've got a stake in the decisions, you're going to be far more likely to get buy-in with whatever the decision is that's made. It allows us to hopefully avoid any unnecessary conflict or any sense of unease about any decisions that are being made, and significantly reducing the likelihood of avoidable stress, harm, hurt, or humiliation that people might experience. So this is a tool that is free to use, can be edited to suit your business, and it's been extremely successful for me and my organization over the last few weeks and the last couple of months. So please feel free to make use of it. Basically work through those questions, bring a massive ton of empathy and good listening techniques to your work group sessions. Be prepared to facilitate them. It's one of our big roles in the health and safety space, and it's one of those roles that isn't talked about enough. And as I promised at the beginning, where to get some additional support. So I just wanted to reflect on my why. Why do I do this stuff? Why do I do the NZHSP? Why do I do the safety tribe? Why do I do advanced safety? Why do I give so much of my time for free? Well, it all streams back to this thing, 1 in 8. In August this year, on the 1st of August, I launched this campaign called the 1 in 8. There will soon be 8 billion people on the planet. And every single day on the planet, 6,000 people are killed in the workplace. That's 6,000 completely and utterly avoidable fatalities. And so on the 1st of August, I ran the 1 in 8 conference. You can find all of the interviews that I had with all of these amazing people over the space of a 2-hour window. It's all on the Advanced Safety YouTube page. It's all freely accessible. These guys are all amazing, and you really want to listen into them. So that's my big why. I basically have set this massive, audacious task that within my lifetime, I intend to influence 1 in 8 people on this planet. Either directly or indirectly, I've got a mission that we need to change the way in which we approach health and safety and the way in which we approach business in general. And so in order to achieve that, it requires a tribe. I can't do this by myself. And so that's one of the key reasons why I established the Accelerator program and the Safety Tribe. It's a private group based on Facebook, that also has a ton of systems sitting behind it. Basically, it's a group that gets together every week. We've set ourselves some big, audacious goals using some of the Your Genius templates that I've put together. And we are working through each of these training modules 1 month at a time. It's specifically designed for those people that are running consultancies, who are thinking about getting into health and safety consulting, or who want to supercharge their careers in the world of health and safety. It's a really exciting space. We are making a massive impact already, and I've covered a ton of material since September. I've now placed all of the stuff that we have done over the last several weeks into a training platform. So the reason why I'm telling you that is, if you wanted to come on board and to join the tribe, or to at the very least hear a little bit more about it, I've got everything all bundled, packaged, and beautifully ready to be delivered to you. So there's a link to book a call with me, get you guys onto the Safety Tribe, or to at the very least explore how we may be able to supercharge your career and supercharge you and your business if you're already into consulting.